G'day and welcome to the Campfire Project again. And today on the panel, first of all, I have with me Michael Lauria from Melbourne. G'day, Michael. How are you?
G'day, Jan. Thanks for having me on again, mate.
Excellent. And we also have Peter Balcarek from Sydney. How are you, Peter?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And Kyree Oliver from Phoenix, Arizona. How are you, Kyree?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, it's been great because I really wanted to get both Peter and Kyree onto the panels with me and that. Michael, you've been a bit of a regular with me, which has been fantastic. So I love the fact that the men are getting involved in this and really sharing their stories and wanting to become part of the panels as well. And in fact, to everybody out there listening and that, these guys gave me a lot of work to do over the weekend because I asked them, what would you like to talk about? And it's like the avalanche of ideas came in. So I've been shuffling them around and trying to get a few, where should we start? Because I think from the input from you three guys, we've got enough for half a dozen or more campfire chats. And I'd really like to, I know this one's going to go well, and I'd really like to be able to do more with the three of you again and go through some of those. So it's, Peter, you mentioned there were two in particular. How can we have discussions about the struggles of masculinity with people who don't believe that there is a struggle? And how can we have an open discussion about sensitive topics when it's so easy to offend people just because they disagree with our opinions? So yep. I think they're two great subjects to start with. So Peter, would you like to just kick us off?
Sure, with pleasure. So the reason why I suggested those topics is that I'm really passionate about masculinity, its transition or current situation in mainly Western world. So I would say mainly United States and then Commonwealth countries and even Western Europe. And I've been following this topic for quite some time, mainly on social media and YouTube, and started following Jordan Peterson, who is one of my heroes and is really eloquent in maybe describing the current situation. And what I'm seeing is that what used to work for us as men, the guidelines of how to be a man, 20, 30, 40 years ago, or, is not really working for us, but we don't have the new set of guidelines. And personally, what I feel is that men today, I'm mostly being told that what they do is wrong, inappropriate, incorrect, and from a position where they are doing something bad to other people or other minority groups or anything like that, right? So, and when I try to speak up and stand up for masculinity, it is usually not well received. And as well, when I see other people and other role models that have much bigger social media reach and media reach as per se, when they try to speak up for masculinity in a very, in my view, very friendly manner, they really get shut down by these all kinds of ideological fractions, that are out there and they're quite loud. So my challenge is, and let's talk about, like how do we, because I believe that we do have to stand up. We have to have the choice and freedom to actually share our opinions. At the same time, it is quite challenging because sharing these opinions then somehow paints us into being the bad boys or bad men, right? And I don't really know how to do it. And when that happens as well, my personal challenge is that I get really frustrated, and my frustration is just confirming what the other part or what the other party is actually trying to prove, right? So I am Eastern European. I get angry very easily, and that's my challenge, and I can see it, and I'm aware of it.
I'm told that's passion, not anger.
Passion, exactly.
True, but that's what you guys would see. The other people would see it as anger, right? So there definitely needs to be self-control, and I'm aware of the fact as well that as men we do a lot of bad things. But most of men are good men, and most of men are doing good things out there. So I guess what's you guys, the other guys on the panel, you maybe have more experience with this, so maybe you guys can share how do you approach this pickle, I guess.
I'm happy to kick this off if that's okay. What I've noticed, and we were happy to talk about Jordan Peterson. He's definitely a big influence of mine too. And he talks about these factions that you mentioned, Peter, in regards to the fact that they're very loud, but that they're very small. It's a very small group of people making a ridiculous amount of noise, both online and offline.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that I believe we're paying too much attention to them. I've been on this journey now for in the background for quite a few years, and more so in the forefront over the last few months. And I'm going to tell you, the majority of the feedback that I'm getting in relation to men stepping up into what I call more integrated and embodied masculinity is really positive, and from both men and women. Because I think we all know that there's a bit of a problem in our society when we talk about the toxic masculinity that we see out there so much in media, and the Me Too movement, which at its core is very positive and it's good, but that's sort of spiraled out of control as well. And now it's painting all men, no matter what situation we're talking about, into the perpetrators and women into victims. And so when we talk about all of this sort of stuff, and then we try to step up and say, well, men need to become more masculine and understand what these masculine traits are and redefine what masculinity actually is, and then allow men to rediscover what that means, it's seen as toxic and it's seen as damaging to society. Because what we do is as a society and as a collective, is that we look at these traits that you were talking about, Peter, which are bad, and I have a slightly different view on that. I don't believe these traits are bad per se.
I agree.
I believe the expression of them can be seen as bad, and so this is why I talk about embodied and integrated men who can embody all of these traits that we can easily perceive as negative and have a more healthy expression of them, because they're all part of being a man and part of having that real sense of purpose and direction and masculinity within us. It's all part of us, and we shouldn't try to deny or suppress them, but it's really about the expression of them. And if we learn how to express in better ways, then nobody can ever put that title of toxic on masculinity. It's these disembodied aspects of the masculine where men get angry and frustrated, and then that turns into violence, and it's usually against women because men are physically stronger. That's where we see toxicity in masculinity, and it's not necessarily wrong, it's just misdefined.
When you say about the expression of it, that's most important. Is like anger is part of our nature, it's part of everyone's nature. Anger is appropriate at the right times. It's how you use it. If somebody's attacking your family, it's time to get angry.
Of course.
Your family. To sit back and say, oh, no, I'm not going to get angry. Well, that's allowing the perpetrator to do what they want to do. So it's the appropriateness of it, as you say, which is really important. But as
that's really important to remember when we're all on this journey as men towards, re-embodying and rediscovering what masculinity means, is to what you were saying, Alan, is just key. Appropriate responses and inappropriate responses are important, paramount.
So I think, Peter, that's probably one of the big things that I was going to hit on when you do come into those people who are overstepping the boundary on the other side, is explaining to them the inappropriateness of their approach as well. And I think we as men, a lot of times we don't do a great job of us calling out what is toxic. And I think a lot of times we get into this battle of like, I'm not toxic, and masculinity itself isn't toxic. Here's what toxic masculinity looks like. But we do not such a great job of calling it out when it does happen, which I think that's what really will help people balance it out and not be able to call us toxic. Because if I'm able to identify toxic behavior and tell you what it looks like, I'm now able to say, hey, I'm on the same team as what the Me Too movement is supposed to be. The Me Too movement is supposed to drown out toxic masculinity. Hey, I want to do that as well. My only hang up is I don't want to do away with masculinity as a whole, because I think masculinity drives society. I think it drives families. I think it drives everything. I think the masculine energy is the driver. And so why would we ever do away with it? But I completely agree with doing away with it toxic, but there's a certain line where we get past doing away with toxic masculinity and we start cutting away at genuine masculinity. But that's where the line needs to be. And so we kind of all need to draw a line in the sand and say, here's where masculinity starts and stops in our new definition. And I think it's kind of up to us to all shape and define, like you said at the beginning, Peter, like we've kind of thrown out the rule book. Here's what masculinity has always been, and it's no longer that. So now what is it now? And I think that's what the four of us and so many other men that I know, that's what we're continually trying to shape. But for the people that we're influencing, we need to start creating those guidelines and saying, here's where you, as a lot of women, and unfortunately now a lot of men, are trying to chip away at genuine masculinity. But also on the other end, here's where men are taking quote unquote masculinity and running away with it, where we're taking it way too far so that people are allowed to call all of us toxic and all masculinity toxic. So we kind of need to keep it within that good balance.
Yeah, as you say, it's where you sit is depending on how you see things as well. Michael, you mentioned the at the core, these groups like Me Too and Men Too and all the rest of it, they are good in what they're doing, but they're like tribes. They're separate from each other, so there's always going to be a battle between them. One's trying to swing the pendulum one way, one's trying to swing it the other way. And with so many groups, we don't have a pendulum anymore. We have a weight on a string, and it's going in 360-degree directions. And it's all over the place. It's like trying to, tighten the spokes up on a bicycle wheel. It's just never ending. So this is one of the reasons why it's we together, bring it together, and we have those boundaries. As you said, Kyree, we need to have, this is what it is, and then we won't go beyond that, but we won't accept anything less than that as well.
Yeah.
So we need to have some positive boundaries.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, that's the key, right? It's, you said, we together. It's just that what I'm seeing, and maybe I'm seeing it because I am, so in it, but the term of toxic masculinity in itself, I disagree with it. It's toxic behavior. Then you have new terms that popped up recently, like mansplaining. Then you have manspreading. You can't sit like a man on the tube or in the train, right? And all the negative behavior is connected to men. It's connected to masculinity. There's a friend of mine ran a men's group recently. It was a 50 men of all ages, and what came out of the men's group is that teenagers are ashamed of being masculine because that's what they are being told. Masculinity is bad. Masculinity is violent. Masculinity is toxic, and that's something that is not going to set us up for successful identification of the new guidelines, because if inherently we believe that masculinity is bad or negative, as the American Psychologists Association does, based on the guidelines that they have ruled out, that pretty much masculinity is a bunch of whole negative groups of behaviors, then it's going to be very difficult to get over it. And I think that we need to stand up for this. We need to call it out. We need to call out the bad behavior of a lot of men. And I'm not denying it doesn't happen. At the same time, to call it and group it under a general term of toxic masculinity, it's not going to help us, because there's a lot of women that are behaving in a bad way. We don't call it toxic femininity. We shouldn't. But why do we call negative behavior or bad behavior toxic masculinity when it's perpetrated by men?
I think you're spot on when you say it should be toxic behavior, because that again brings us together, and we're looking at the behavior. We're not looking at the
correct.
It's in the expression. It's in the expression of all of this, and that's what we have to look at. And what we're actually battling here is not so much people, but indoctrination. And we find this it's spread all across media and all in our society. It is this constant and consistent indoctrination to indoctrinate kids and teenagers and even young adults into believing that being a man and stepping up into that self-assuredness and inner strength and integrity and courage and compassion and having some direction and purpose, that's actually not a good thing. And so this indoctrination is what's causing the problem. And unfortunately, it is really a very small group of people that are driving this, and it's all this the far left extremists, and that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing your normal, average, everyday woman or man driving this movement. We're not seeing that at all. We're seeing real far left extremists driving the movement. And because they're so loud and they're so insistent, and yeah, a lot of people are actually paying attention. And then when it comes into schools, I've seen a lot of stuff recently where they're starting to teach in schools about toxic masculinity. And so boys are being exposed to this now at a very young age and believing that it's toxic just to be a boy and that they shouldn't be able to express in a way that is natural to them, and not just in a way that's natural, but for us as men to be able to guide our children, our young boys, to learn how to express our masculinity and their masculinity in a really good way, in a well-rounded, well-balanced, healthy way. We're just being told, or kids are just being told now, whatever expression is there, whatever it is that you want to do is bad, it's toxic. And it's disrespectful to women, and you just can't do it. And it's indoctrination that we're battling.
Yeah, isn't it insane that here we are, we're doing this to boys, and that's saying that you can't express yourself in any way. Boys can't be boys. And at the same time, we're saying to men, you need to be expressing yourself more. Well, we train them for all those school years until they're late teens to shut down and keep it to themselves, and then all of a sudden they're supposed to be able to express. Well, how can you do that if you've been trained not to?
And I'll tell you what, when we start teaching young impressionable boys to suppress their innate inherent nature, what's going to happen then is, that's a very unnatural thing to do to begin with. And so what we will find is we'll find all of these boys and teenagers suppressing and repressing their innate natures. And I promise you, the more you suppress something, the worse it gets expressed, and then we actually create more of what is being called toxic masculinity, because of the fact that we're teaching boys to suppress and repress their natural inclinations and their natural emotions. Instead of teaching them, you express it. But look, these are some really healthy ways to express it, as opposed to this. This is what's cool and this is what isn't. Don't want you to repress and suppress everything, because that's unhealthy too.
That's right.
Yeah, I think the behavior that we're talking about, like you said, it's toxic behavior. I would even go as far as to say it's a lack of masculinity that usually makes these things happen. A man who hits a woman, to me, that I've always heard that's toxic masculine. The whole Me Too movement. A man who would do any of those things to a woman,
he's not masculine.
My brain, the only thing that makes sense is that it's a lack of masculinity that makes him believe he is allowed to do that. Masculinity, to me, a big piece of it is a respect towards women, a respect towards the feminine energy. Also, a lot of masculinity is being willing and receptive to embody your own feminine energy when it's important, when it becomes apparent, the ability to receive and not only to give. The masculine is always giving, it's driving, it's presenting. The feminine is what you receive. Whenever you meditate, whenever you pray, whenever you sit and be mindful, that's our feminine. Part of our masculine is embodying that feminine. So anytime I see any man do any of those behaviors, it doesn't look like toxic masculine. To me, it looks like a lack of masculine. So I think that's where we have to shift the conversation on its head and say, no, we don't need less masculinity. We need a whole lot more of it.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a really good point. That's really cool way of looking at it, because that is, it's very positive. It's a positive change, right? So we can take the positive masculinity, right, and make it drive the connection to femininity. And I really like how you have shifted the focus from the bad masculine into the good masculine, because the bad masculine is just bad behavior, which is not masculine, right?
And I think it's important for us to do in our personal lives as well.
Yeah,
and I've made a point for myself, and I'd love for a lot of men to start doing it. Whenever any woman or anybody at all will bring up a toxic masculine, I have to now go correct them and say, no, that's not toxic masculine. That's a lack of masculine. And I think when we're able to start that message, we start repairing what we've allowed to happen over probably the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. I think that's spot on. What Michael was just saying a moment ago about the masculine side of things, and what you've said there is that when you look at it, by not being masculine, that's where we have the toxic behavior. So being masculine means there's no toxic behavior. So keeping toxic away from masculine would be a really great thing to do. and away from femininity as well. It's like, my belief is that we don't have good men and we don't have bad men. We have men and we have boys. Being a man is not a rite of passage when you get to a certain age. It's a rite of passage when your heart's in that right place, when you become that masculine, that leader. So really, we've got old boys who are going to go to their grave at the age of 80 and 90, still being boys. So we've got to get away from good men and bad men. We've got to look at masculinity as being the target that we want to get to. And with the right masculinity, we then will have the right behaviour. And if we don't get to that masculinity, then we're going to have toxic behaviour.
Yeah.
Away from it being gender-based, because we're seeing it in women as well. I'm on the train coming back from Sydney late in the evening, say especially a Friday night or a Saturday night, the noise from the younger people, and especially from the girls as well, I just look at it and go, would you bother dating them? You'd never go out with them if you're a young fella. So it's not gender. It's just in the behaviour of our society today, because of all this political correctness that's robbed us of our resilience and positive direction.
Yeah, maybe to reframe that as well, I don't know, I didn't look into it, so I don't have the exact statistics, but I've read somewhere that 90% or even more of all the shooters in America came from broken homes without proper father figure, right? So, I mean, to take it even further, it looks like they have been looked after by women, right? So they didn't have the proper masculine to show them that, hey, what you're going to be doing or what you're just about to do is actually has nothing to do with being a man. We, as few generations, because of all the divorce rates and not having really a group of men that you can grow up with, or if you do have a group of men that you're growing up with, a lot of it is gang memberships and stuff like that. That's not the proper masculine that can lead you through the rites of passage, and it is actually the immature masculine or immature male behavior that will allow you to think that toxic behavior is right way to go.
Yeah. So with Kyree, I'd love to hear more about what you think should be also the discussions that we should be having with people. How should we be talking to women? How should we be talking to those people who are talking about, or condemning masculinity as toxic?
Yeah, again, I think it's one-on-one conversations are a piece of it, but I think how we show up online is another humongous piece. Why we can exemplify this not only to a one-on-one person or wait until we get on stage. The internet kind of is our stage. And so for those of us who feel tasked to bring that balance back to masculine, I think it's part of our duty to have as much reach as possible, or be in front of as much people as possible, so that we can not only say, but also show, here's what masculine looks like. That's why I'm very open with my personal life. I talk about my girlfriend, I talk about my family, I talk about my personal experiences, because I feel like I'm able to show and also keep myself accountable for my own masculinity. If I'm showing my personal life, and if I have my clients and my friends and the people who really know me on my social media, they're able to corroborate who I say I am. They're able to call me out also. I keep an open invite. Let me know when you feel like I've overstepped. Let me know when you feel like I haven't said something that I should have said. Let me know when somebody's exhibiting toxic behavior and I'm not calling them out for it. Because I've tasked myself with it, I feel like we all need to exemplify it 24/7. It's not a job. It's not anything else. It should be the thing that we're embodying, because I think that's what we're asking other men to do as well.
And I think when we do that as well, it's always an idea then when we've asked them to tell us that, but also then to explain to us why they feel that way as well.
Yeah.
Because they could be coming from a point of view of the extreme. And we want to know whether they're, is this what really should be en masse, or is it just your particular individual belief?
I've got a question that I would like to just ask you guys. When we talked earlier about maybe 10 minutes ago in regards to aggressive behaviour not being masculine at all, do we believe that it's not masculine to exhibit aggressive behaviour, or is it simply how that's expressed, that it is a masculine trait? Aggression is a masculine trait. Is it more in the expression of it that determines whether it is healthy or unhealthy, or is it just not a masculine trait. Because I think that when men get violent, and not that violence is okay, not that I condone violence in any way, but when men or women become violent, that's a very masculine thing to do as a result of aggression. And under aggression and under violence is fear, right? And so I do want to challenge that a little bit in terms of aggression not being. I believe it's a masculine trait, and I would hate for us to say, well, that's not being masculine.
No,
I think it's more about the expression of it.
You hit on it really closely before, Michael, when you said it's the expression of it. And I think that's the major thing. It's the way we express it. Well, look at football. That's aggression.
It is.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
The other goal, unless you're aggressive, because the others are pushing you back.
And we go to the gym. You know, guys go to the gym and we deadlift and we squat and we bench press and we try to push out as much weight as possible, right? There's an absolute, like there's a real drive behind that, and it's testosterone, and testosterone is what fuels aggression. And there's got to be all of that. All of that's got to be embodied, and then being able to express in a very, very healthy way, or in an embodied way, and expressing in a really healthy way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate you clarifying that. I would never talk down aggression or aggressiveness. It's like you said, how it's expressed. It's how it's being put into action. Because, like, so specifically, I was like, aggression towards women, never ever is that masculine.
No.
Aggression, I think, has a humongous place, and I think aggression under control is masculine as hell. I think it's just about as masculine as you get. Somebody breaks into your house. Yeah, somebody breaks into your house, you need to be aggressive as hell. I got my university paid for. I was a high-level college American football player. Aggression was my life. It was part of it. It got me really far in life. And so aggression is incredible, but controlled aggression, I think, is what makes it masculine. Uncontrolled aggression would be that lack of masculine, which is what I would equate to a man hitting a woman. So I think you're so true with that's the embodiment of it, or how it's being brought into reality.
And I think it comes down to also being very intentional about it, because aggression is a masculine trait. So if we're intentional about how we express it, then, and we all know it's wrong to hit a woman or hit anybody for that matter. So if we're very intentional about the expression of it, then it's easy to accept that if somebody hits a woman, if a man hits a woman, that is obviously not a good thing. And we all know that. So it's really about that real intentional expression and conscious expression of the masculine traits.
Yeah, I guess it's as well very strong is intention and the purpose of it, right? So if you are aggressive and your purpose is destruction,
that's not good.
That's probably not good, right? But if you're aggressive and your purpose is creation or protection, then I would say that is a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
And another thing as well is like this is maybe playing with words, right? Never hit a woman. Absolutely. However, if you're gonna have a woman that is beating up your kids, what are you gonna do?
So you remove the children.
Okay.
Well, you remove the children, but you also, like, there's no woman in the world that I can't grab her by the shoulders and subdue her, or wrap my arms around her and subdue her. So to there, I would still say never hit a woman, because I tell my girlfriend all the time, you can get as angry as you'd want with me. You couldn't hurt me unless you have a weapon. But like, you getting angry, or, you know, if there was somebody beating your children, there's no woman I can't subdue without hitting her. Unless it's like a UFC fighter lady, maybe I need to like kick her in the head, but that's it. That's just about it. But like 99.9%,
that's appropriate.
We're able to circumnavigate that piece of it. But it goes back to what both of you guys said about Jordan Peterson. I think his quote was what a safe man is not a good man. A good man is incredibly violent, who has it all like under conscious control.
Integrated. The key word is integrated. You know, like it's we all have the side of us, you know, that we don't like, and to deny it is really suppressing it. What I believe needs to be done is to accept that we have it, integrate it, and then I guess manage it from that perspective. But to say that, hey, you know, I would never hurt someone is actually being delusional, because there will be situations, or you could be put into situations where you would hurt some people, right? But it's about owning that, accepting that trait, and saying, okay, I'm going to integrate it with myself. It's the the cool expression is own your darkness. And once you're able to do that, then it's much less likely that you will use your darkness later on. But if you're going to suppress it and say, well, I'm a good person, I will never hurt someone, I can't get violent, I can't get aggressive, that's just being delusional, because everybody has that in them.
And those are the scariest people to be around.
Yeah.
The people who try to discredit the darkness are the people I would never want around me. Because as soon as you don't have control anymore, you don't have a relationship with the darkness, so you don't know how it acts. You don't know how to talk with it. You don't know how to reason with your darkness. As soon as it comes out, that person flies off the handle. Whereas a person who's handled and gotten a relationship with their darkness, you understand how to communicate with it within yourself internally, so that doesn't manifest in school shootings, in, again, being incredibly aggressive towards your family, your friends, your whoever. So it's definitely, I think that's huge, is getting a relationship with that darkness and understanding it.
And it's interesting because that darkness is what Carl Jung calls the shadow.
Yeah.
And that exists in the subconscious mind, right? So, and this is why I was very, very intentional. So I just wrote a book on this, as all of you know, and that's why I was really intentional about the language that I used in the book, in terms of what does that mean to rediscover your masculinity, and it really is very much about don't try to deny all of these aspects of the masculine, right? As opposed to doing that, we integrate the shadow into the conscious mind, and the conscious mind is the thinking mind, the one that knows what's right and wrong. And so that if we integrate the shadow into the conscious mind and then embody all of these aspects in a very accepting, self-compassionate way, then the expression of all of that is just a really good man with integrity and strength and compassion, purpose, direction, courage, and very, very high levels of self-awareness as well. And so it goes to what all three of you have been saying about just the embodiment and the integration. They're very important words to use, because we're not trying to deny that aspects of the masculine can be expressed in very unhealthy ways. What we're saying is we want to bring men to a place where they have a level of self-awareness where we go, okay, cool, well, that's part of me, and that's okay, and this is how I can express it in really good ways, which are constructive instead of damaging. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Kyree, you mentioned that you were a football player, right? So the feeling that you have with your teammates when you're just about to hit, the football ground, when you are just like, you just feel like you want to break shit, like you want to go out there and destroy. But when you actually integrate it, what do you put it into? You put it into a controlled, managed way of playing the game. And the purpose is winning. But the way that the feeling that you have, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but the feeling just when you are just about to go out there on the football pitch, that's many times scary. But if you deny that, you will not know what to do with it, right? But if you own it, you really get into it, you fully experience that, you will get to know it, and then you will know what to do with it when it pops up in a situation where the aggression would obviously not be the right way to go with.
Yeah, and I think, and I've never seen a study on it before, but I think if you take a poll of people who have committed a lot of these, just again, horrible actions throughout their lives, and ask how many of them have actually experienced that I'm experiencing this internal chaos, and I'm going to actively accept it, understand it, and integrate it.
Yeah,
I would say you'd get almost none of them have ever even attempted it. So like I would, even in high school, I would, before football games, when everybody's listening to their loud rock or rap music, I'm putting on the calmest music I can possibly find, because that's what I needed. I felt so chaotic in my head. I was ready to, be incredibly violent and aggressive for the next 2.5 hours. I needed to slow myself down and say, okay, I need to have a conversation with this thing so that I can control it and put it out only when it's necessary. Only in between those two whistles, when the play starts and when the play stops. I don't carry it over. I don't get angry at anybody. I'm not trying to fight anybody else in the field. I'm able to control it and push it only where it's relevant.
Yeah.
And I think we can do that. I know for a fact that's carried over into the rest of my life as well.
I
Even
think
though I
that's
don't play
awesome.
sports anymore.
I think that's awesome, Kyree, and that's a perfect example of a man who has integrated and embodied those aspects of the masculine that can be seen and expressed in very damaging ways. So that represents a very high level of self-awareness and a high level of embodiment and integration. So well done.
Yeah, even like most of professional fighters, like I used to do kickboxing, and my kickboxing trainer was just scary as you would not want to do anything, like you would never do anything with him. But this guy, he told me when I saw him in the ring, sparring, he was the scariest guy. As soon as he stepped out of the ring, the nicest guy ever. He was, he would talk about how he loves his daughter, the little one, and most of these fighters, apart from maybe Conor McGregor, who likes to just run his mouth all the time, they are really crazy beasts in the ring. But as soon as they step out, they are great role models. They are against violence. This guy who was his name here in Australia, Green. Is it Anthony Green or the boxer who was fighting? What's his name? So one of the very well-known boxers in Australia. He founded the charity which is fighting against violence on the streets. The one punch policy there. So it's amazing how men can own that strength, aggression, anger, and violence, and the darkest side of it. But when it's integrated, they actually channel it in a way where they encourage much less of it in normal lives.
And it's appropriate expression, isn't it?
And those men become real role models, because at the moment, as you mentioned before, Peter, with those men are coming from broken households. If we look at when children are first born, mum's role is to really give them those domestic boundaries that keep them safe within the environment. Yeah. But as the children grow up, and especially the boys, they need dad there to give them new boundaries before they go into the world, because they're going into the world, suppressing everything, getting out there, no boundaries, and it's coming out the wrong way. Yeah. So we need to be able to guide the boys and that coming through. We need to be able to show them the difference between, well, there's two people that, you see them as masculine, but this one's doing it appropriately and this one's doing it wrong. Yeah. So we can then say, right, yes, be masculine, but then as Michael has been saying as well, it's all about making sure that the way in which we express it is appropriate. So it's not toxic masculinity, it's masculinity, but it's either expressed in a toxic or good way.
And if we're not careful, sorry, Alan, I thought you were finished.
Yep, I am. Go ahead.
If we're not careful, we're going to create a generation coming after us of boys who turn into teenagers and men who have absolutely no idea of this, of how to actually be a man, how to be a masculine man in today's society. We just won't, because we're being guided by...
Already done that?
Pardon?
Haven't we already succeeded that one? Or, there's that many boys out there who've got no damn idea.
Well, they do, and especially when they're being guided by disembodied men, we're seeing in society now, who have no idea what masculinity means and how to embody it. We're going to find this next generation come through who have got even less of an idea, because they haven't been guided effectively by men who are influences in their lives. So it's one of these things that I believe is very important and vital to the health and well-being of our society moving forwards, that we get a handle on this, and collectively as a society we start to really put some love and attention into masculinity and help men to embody and integrate it at a higher level. And I think that's up to us. We have to take responsibility as men to do that. Because
I agree. 100% agree. At the same time, I'm quite positive. I'm quite positive about this. I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it starts getting really much better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think looking at people like Jordan Peterson, just proves that men are really hungry for this type of role modeling. It's what I get sad about, though, and very frustrated a lot, is that Jordan Peterson is probably one of the most misquoted men out there, who is presented by these loud voices as somebody who is sexist, misogynist, transphobic, and all the words, that you can come up with. And I'm listening to him and like, how can you even call this person, this man, who gets emotional so many times. He cried on camera so many times, and he is so respectful of his wife, his daughter.
Mm.
And this guy gets presented as a misogynist, you know, so that's something that I really get frustrated with.
Well, I think he gets presented as a misogynist by the very small but loud voices, right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's very loud.
Well, it is very loud, but I mean, I saw an interview with Jordan Peterson the other night, watched an interview on YouTube, and the interviewer asked him, what would you say to all of the people out there that believe you're controversial and you're sending the wrong message? And he said, you know what, I've just finished a tour of 2 years across the world, and he said, I've spoken to tens of thousands of people and come into contact with hundreds of thousands of people over that period of time. And he said, in that whole 2 years, one person in all of that time, all those people, there was only one person that actually approached me and had something negative to say. Everybody else had positive, wonderful, loving things to say, and how he's helped to transform and change their lives. So he also says this. He said, I'm not paying attention to that small, loud group who are just keyboard warriors now. He's not paying attention.
I think that's the hard part is that.
Sorry, Kyree, go ahead.
So I think that's the difficult thing is that it's only on the internet.
Yeah.
I don't run into any of it in my normal life. I've never had a woman get angry at me for opening the door for her, or I've never experienced any of the things that we see as humongous problems online. I'll go down those threads sometimes and see what people are actually saying, but I think the problem becomes we've acknowledged those people so much online that we make ourselves believe that it exists in the real world to that degree. It simply doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
So for me, let them argue in circles all day long online. As long as it doesn't come into my life, into the real world, I'm happy. What the problem is, and what we need to do our own parts in stopping, is us giving it enough attention and trying to fight against irrational people who don't have a grasp on what's actually going on. As long as we engage with them back and forth, we give them power because we're giving them attention.
Yeah, okay.
You rob them of attention, you rob them of their ability to influence.
That's it. Yeah. So there's an old saying that when you point at somebody, there are three fingers pointing back at where the real problem is. And so anytime we're getting anything negative these days, yes, we're emotional beings, so you do react. But before I respond, I always sit back and go, okay, where is this person coming from? Why are they saying this? What's their need here? What is it that's not right in their world? And once you go through that, at the end of it, I'm feeling sympathy for them. Yep. Not empathy, but sympathy. We're just going, how could I help them to move forward? Not that I'm always going to be absolutely right, but I know that where they're coming from has a different agenda. It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about or what they've stated.
Yep. And it's really important in the context of that too, to educate our sons and our daughters on what to pay attention to and what not to. Because they spend most of their time online, and their perceptions and their worldviews are formed based on what they see online and what they read online. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was good. Yeah, that's a good answer. So thank you. I already learned something more today. There you go.
Hey, this is why I've been running these panels and that, because I'm a greedy sod. I want to get as much knowledge as I can, and I'm getting it every time I get people on the panel to talk to me, which is great.
Yeah.
So any final, we'll start to wrap it up, but first of all, go through each of you. Just what things would you like to leave with the audience today? Michael?
Look, like I sort of mentioned before a couple of times, I think what I'd like to leave is that we have to come to a better understanding that masculine isn't necessarily good or bad, it just is. And what we have to do is we have to encourage and foster a society or an environment within our society where we encourage boys and men to step up into the masculine, and that it's a good thing. And what's even better or desirable is to encourage men and boys to embody and integrate all those aspects of the masculine in really good ways that are constructive as opposed to destructive.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Kyree?
I'd say, again, it's really checking in with yourself and making sure you're doing your own part in this whole thing, and not knowing what you're for more than what you're against. So embodying what's true versus fighting against what isn't. I think the more energy, again, we give towards what isn't, the more we're just going to start arguing in circles with people who we simply don't need to be giving attention to anyway. And so really focusing on what do I believe to be true, and let me be who embodies and expresses that over and over and over, again, 24/7. It's not an 8-hour day job. I think it's something we need to do continually. At the same time, I think the more energy and proactiveness we put towards that, the less receptive we are to the things that we simply don't want to exist in our worlds.
Yeah, awesome.
Excellent. Then Peter?
Hard to add to what the boys already have said, but I guess the only thing that I would add for myself is looking at the bigger picture. Yeah, looking at the bigger picture, not just taking internet, as the sole source of truth, and really standing up for something that is truth for myself. If that comes from a place of goodness and I guess creation as opposed to destruction. Yeah.
Cool.
As I say, and that we're all trying to be a better version of ourselves, and at the same time, being a better version of ourselves is one thing, but to share that with those around us and to be part of other people's lives in a positive way is a reason for being a better version of ourselves.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. So what I'd like to do is thank all three of you for being here today. It's been brilliant. As usual, it's great conversations, and like Peter, I'm going away with a bit more knowledge as well. So thank you very much for that. And what I'd love you to do, if we've got those other things that we talked about or subjects, I'd like to get you guys together again and look at some of those as well.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Love to. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen, very much for being on today, and for everybody who's been listening. Hope you've enjoyed today's session, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.